I now give the floor to Mr. Agnew, establishing a programme for the environment and climate action, LIFE. Mr. Agnew, you have the floor, sir.
Well, personally, it's rather a big day for me drafting a parliamentary opinion. It is also my birthday, and I don't think I've ever been to a birthday party before where most of the people there don't want me to have a happy day. The draft opinion has generated a lot of hate mail. I refer this to the Reverend Philip Foster, who is also a Cambridge University physics graduate and is in regular contact with climate scientists. Any detailed questions will be sent down this route. The term denier frequently occurs. I must put on record that I am well aware of the climatic changes that have occurred in Europe over the last 2,000 years, and I'm certain more change will occur. I disagree that we are about to experience imminent Armageddon, but I do not deny that mankind in general, and farmers in particular, can positively improve the world's weather. It might surprise you to know that once upon a time I was as verdantly green as the Greens on this issue. The University of East Anglia, which is close to my home, has a climatology department. In the mid-1980s, a public conference was held there, launching the new concept of man-made global warming due to slightly increased CO2 levels in the atmosphere. This was a bit of a surprise because as recently as 1977, a book had been published about an impending ice age. I attended the event and listened to scientists assuring us in deadly serious tones that within 30 years the UK would have a Mediterranean-type climate and sea levels would rise by at least 1 metre, probably 5 and possibly 10. I swallowed all of this, and to take my own climate action, I started growing durum wheat, which thrives in a Mediterranean climate. I grew 11 crops over the next 15 years. Apart from one, they all failed, either due to late spring frost, which ruined the yield, or rain pre-harvest, which spoiled the quality. I was motivated to keep going in the same way as an oil prospector who can't bear the idea of stopping drilling because he might just be inches from oil. The 30 years, of course, were up by 2017 with no drastic warming. 3 cold winters from 2010 changed the language from global warming to climate change. The first of those winters was so severe that I lost a third of my sugar beet crop due to having been assured to severe frost, but having been assured by climate experts only weeks before we couldn't possibly have a cold winter because of CO2 levels. During that time, some highly unprofessional emails between climate scientists at the University of East Anglia were leaked on a large scale, creating the strong impression that statistics were being manipulated to suit an agenda. At that point, science became a religion, with the twin Bibles of Al Gore's film, which succumbed to a legal challenge over its accuracy, and the pronouncements of the IPCC, whose chairman at the time was a railway engineer with substantial interest in the renewable energy sector. The religion insists that any severe climatic events, be they wet, dry, hot or cold, are caused by the presence of greenhouse gases, particularly CO2, with other factors apparently ignored. In the draft opinion, with the technical assistance of Philip Foster, we have outlined the main drivers of climate change. All of these are beyond the reach of mankind, even farmers. We have shown, with the benefit of satellite measurements, that the main concentrations of CO2 are found above the equatorial rainforests where human activity is minimal. However, the Commission wished to use the LIFE budget to explore ways of reducing greenhouse gas emissions from farms, particularly CO2. This is actually pretty easy. Arable farmers either use their tractors less and leave land fallow, or they use GM crops and glyphosate, which minimise tractor operations. The real problem here is the undefined objective. What constitutes an improvement of the world's climate? What element of this improvement is the consequence of reduced CO2? Is the loss of food production a worthwhile price to pay for this? And overarching all of this is the fact that if CO2 levels fall from 400 parts per million to 280 parts per million, photosynthesis will suffer. The ruminant animals owned by livestock farmers emit methane. An enterprising company has jumped on the bandwagon here with a new product called a burp converter. They will now no doubt want LIFE budget to purchase this for farmers. A mobile phone-sized gadget is suspended over the cow's mouth from a ring through the cow's nose. The methane passes through the converter, is oxidised to CO2 and water vapour. There are two spoilers here. The first is that one greenhouse gas is being converted into two others, so we're back to square one. The second is that this conversion happens anyway as the exhaled methane steadily mixes with atmospheric oxygen. The gadget merely accelerates this conversion. The life budget might be used to fund breeding programs to select low-emitting ruminants. Even if a welfare-friendly method could be found to accurately measure methane emissions 24/7 from both ends of the animal, it is likely that the reason for a low figure is because the cow has a poor metabolism and should really be a candidate for culling and not to be bred from. Nitrous oxide is a greenhouse gas emitted from farms. The main culprits are leguminous crops, which include clover in Ireland. Growing fewer of these will solve the problem. However, these are protein crops and the Commission is keen to see more protein crops grown. The alternative is to use life budget to fund a breeding programme to select plants that produce less nitrous oxide without an accompanying drop in growth rate. If the Commission is serious about this, they will need to allow the use of modern plant breeding techniques, GM and genome editing, which is exactly what the Green lobby don't want. Throughout the Commission proposal, I've deleted the word mitigate because it implies that farming activities change the climate. Adaptation is the key word. The climate will change, and investment is required to ensure that we can adapt to that change, as perhaps we were saying earlier, and not wasted in trying to prevent it. Next May, the farmers in your constituencies will not relish the message that they must reduce farming activities to improve the world's weather. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I must quote as previous speakers. We've got enough figures together with the Greens on 21st of July in AGRI. We protested against this. Mr. Agnew, the rapporteur, was who we were protesting against. There was a Conservative majority, alas. If you can see now how correct we were. You can deny human-caused climate change, but not in such an important report, because otherwise we'll see the emergence of what Mr. Agnew is harping on about. It was in a British, not a German newspaper that reported yesterday about Mr. Agnew's crazy statements. British scientists were quoted. Paleoclimatic information was referred to. The LIFE programme covers the most important environmental and climate-related goals of the EU. There are plans between 2021 to 2024 to have 4.5 billion euros allocated to these programmes. And AGRI has a chance to come up with a serious opinion, but now we have a climate denier coming up with this report. He denies the effects of human activity on the changes in CO2 concentrations.
Danke, Vorsitzender. Ja.
Thanks, Chair. Mr. Agnew often makes a fool of himself. He got votes from his constituents to be in the Parliament. Maybe they will reconsider their vote. Mr. Agnew is in a very particular situation. He's making us all look like total idiots. He's making the Parliament look like cretins. I would once again indicate that Mr. Agnew was appointed rapporteur with a majority not only covering the right wing and the very right wing in a coalition. There were also votes from the EPP and votes from the Liberals. That's why he was appointed rapporteur. This was this only a matter of internal procedure? No. Right now, MÜLLER and Des, I would call upon you, in your opinions, to not follow this dubious and woolly science from Mr. Agnew. Please distance yourself from this. We may well not see eye to eye. We may well have a heated debate. There are areas of science where there are different construals of results, but there are also areas of science where it's crystal clear. So I would call upon you to distance yourself from this nonsense as depicted by Mr. Agnew?
The opinion of our committee will include amendments. And you, shadow rapporteurs, you all have the right to submit your amendments. And if they are supported by the majority, that will be the new shape of the report, of the opinion.
There is criticism about Mr. Agnew getting this report. We are all sound Democrats. Mr. Agnew was elected into Parliament and he belongs to a specific group. So it's a bit dodgy if you deny him the right to come up with an opinion. We are all able to hammer out the contents of this report and chip in our 2 cents.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chairman. In principle, I want to thank the Rapporteur and congratulate him on behalf of the group, but I don't want to do that today. I want to be very clear about this. I said this to the coordinators. He is discrediting himself, but he's also undermining the European Union and making it weaker, and the committee. And I think he's undermining you as chairman of the Agricultural Committee. I think we need to look at the situation as it stands. We knew in the MV committee that they should be involved in this report when we're talking about the CAP, and I don't think it's good to hear what we have just heard in this report. What about the respect of the Paris Accords, Sustainable Development Goals? They are important in this context. I didn't hear about these in the file, and I think there's a real lack of will to develop these. There were fires. I'm not going to go into detail on all of the problems. How can we accept to listen to what is in this report? I think it's dangerous. I think we need to be cautious, and I think it's highly risky.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thanks, Chair. I absolutely do not see eye to eye with Mr. David Agnew and his climate change denial. I respect him as a parliamentarian, but I'm against what he's saying. That's why I will be tabling amendments to offset what he's cast aside.
I think, as many of you know, I keep a block of wood in my office, and I asked the block of wood this morning some questions, and I said to the block of wood, what is climate change? When it comes to climate change, I agree with the block of wood. I don't agree with UKIP.
Oj, oj, oj. Pan poseł Hausling.
Ja, Ihr Erstaunen kann man tragen.
Well, Chair, I just want to come back to what Ulrike MÜLLER said. You're pretending that every report is equally important. You might get a report done by a Eurosceptic. You and Albert Dess have set this process in train. We entrusted an important report to somebody who's made us risible. You're saying he'll be negotiating in Environment Committee. So let's just acknowledge what he's written. Maybe he's in cahoots with Trump. Let's focus on the LIFE programme and consider whether we've not appointed the wrong rapporteur. Chair, I would like to pick up on what Ulrike MÜLLER said. I think we ought to behave like Democrats. We've appointed Agnew as rapporteur. If there are tenable arguments against it, then this report can be adjusted. Since I entered politics, I've seen to it that we use resources parsimoniously. But let's not to get all hot under the collar. While you were talking to a wooden block, and maybe it's led you to barking up the wrong tree.
I think mankind's influence on climate change is undeniable, but calling people stupid who don't agree with me is not going to bring them along with me.
Can I say, everyone has the right to an opinion and a view, and you cannot be a Democrat when it suits. And I have to say to the Socialists and the Greens, who in the coordinators here yesterday called into question the right of anyone from the UK to attend a hearing or speak at it. These are the Democrats who actually want democracy in their own right, in their own way and in their own interpretation. So I think both they need to ask themselves, here we are, and I congratulate Mr Agnew on his birthday today and wish him well for the future, and many of them. But as I say, everyone has the right to a view. And as always, as you have said, Chairman, in this committee, this is the way this committee works. Everybody has the same right to put forward an amendment, to change this report and to make it clear what the outcome in the long term will be, what we vote for in this committee somewhere down the line in 6-8 weeks' time, whenever that actually takes place. That's the way this committee works.
Thanks, Chair. I didn't expect to take the floor. As far as I'm concerned, what was said by Mr Agnew is a crime against the very planet. It's a pre-announced death.
Ja, ein herzliches Dank.
Thank you very much, Mr Agnew. Today took us all back. I was astounded he was appointed Rapporteur. The stance of Mr Des is well known, but as to the rest of the EPP, I was struck and dismayed, and the same applies to ALDE. The Environment Committee entrusted the report to ALDE. What was presented here today gives us food for thought. I'm also in the ENVI committee, and I think AGRI is an important committee also when it comes to climate change, because the thing is, farming is one of the underlying causes of climate change, and with projects such as LIFE we can make a tangible contribution to boosting the importance of farming in the EU, so seeing to it that there is a future for the upcoming generations, so that they can have a life worth living. We would be squandering an opportunity here if we were to fail to make amendments to what's been tabled. And I hope that the surprise next time will be that Mr Agnew withdraws his name from the report before it comes up to vote.
And now I give the floor to the representative of the European Commission. If you could be brief, we would appreciate it greatly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Chair, and thank you, Mr Agnew, for your draft opinion, which seeks to delete references to climate mitigation and clean energy transition in our proposed LIFE programme. If I understand correctly, the logic is that there is no need to mitigate CO2 emissions, and in fact CO2 is one of agriculture's biggest friends. I think you also point out that the LIFE programme should instead focus on climate adaptation to prepare for the next Maunder minimum, or the mini ice age, which scientists have talked about. In the Commission's opinion, I think the politics, law and science actually support the need for climate mitigation. As people will recall, in Paris in December 2015, 197 parties from around the world came together to set a target, a 2-degree, holding a global temperature increase to 2 degrees Celsius, with an ambition of reducing it to 1.5 degrees Celsius in the future. So there is a clear global ambition. I think the politics have clearly supported this. In this context, the EU, of course, has proposed a 40% CO2 emissions reduction by 2030. This was part of our commitment for the Paris Agreement, and in fact all the legislation to bring that into place has been adopted, and this Parliament was part of that process. That was co-decided in terms of the emissions trading system, in terms of vehicles, in terms of burden sharing, in terms of renewable energy, in terms of energy efficiency. Much of that law has been brought into effect to actually implement that 40% reduction. And in fact, as we know, the LIFE programme has been successful in recent years. It is 25 years old. It has brought forward many bright ideas and will continue to improve and also bring forward new technologies to enable Europe to implement this target and to create jobs, much needed jobs out there to achieve this. In terms of the science, what I understand and what I've read, the emergence of a new ice age or a new mini ice age is questionable, as is the Maunder phenomenon, which was noted in the 17th century. Scientists question both these. And in terms of science, the international community certainly believes that climate change is happening. And as we know, perhaps before the committee votes on this report, the IPCC, the International Panel for Climate Change, will report on the 8th of October this year with its latest findings and its latest ideas on what is happening out there and how climate can be addressed, how climate change can be addressed. So the Commission stands very much by its LIFE proposal. We believe that environmental matters as well as climate and clean energy all go hand in hand. The programme has been a success. It will continue to use its limited budget to bring forward catalytic actions in order to drive bigger projects forward for success in the future. Thank you.
Bardzo dziękuję. Oddaję głos panu Agnew.
Thank you very much. I give the floor back to Mr. Agnew.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't think in the 9 years I've been here I've ever heard a rapporteur being so roundly condemned. So I must hold the record for that, of which I'm immensely proud. I set out to give everybody an opportunity to row back from what is happening. I've given you the opportunity. Whether you take it or not is entirely up to you, and I'm quite certain most of you are not going to take it. But this opinion is now a formal statement. It's in the files, it's in the annals, and I'll be, in my very old age, I'll be delighted to know I did that. And I am not comparing myself to Galileo, but he was actually alone at one stage in saying the Earth, the sun doesn't go round the Earth goes round the sun. So good luck with your amendments. I'm not in a very compromising frame of mind, and I feel I have woken up this committee, and I don't think ever before, talking about an opinion as opposed to a report, has there been so much interest. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, we can use the procedure of amendments, and by using the amendments we can amend the document. And I hope in the end the amended document receives the support of the majority in the Parliament. So now what we are doing, we're waiting for the amendments. So this is the procedure. Mr. Agnew, you see what a nice present for your birthday. We wish you all the best on your birthday. We're happy for you. And what the final results, what the final shape of the opinion will be, now all of this depends on us, and we are all aware of this.